In this tutorial, what we're going to be doing is going over how to create a GitHub repository, or more commonly known as a GitHub repo. So what we're going to do is, last time we were in GitHub, we were able to log in. So just make sure you're logged in with your GitHub repository. And now right next to that, you'll notice that there's this plus sign and this option called New Repository. So if you click that, it will automatically fill in your particular GitHub username first, and then we place the repository name. Now we're going to be creating a lot of repositories, so we're going to come up with a naming strategy. And this is what it's going to be. First you place the course code, then you place the unit, then you place the programming language that you're using. In our case, we're going to use Python to begin with. And then you use the name of the program you're creating. And it's standard to always create a Hello World program first, so that's what we're going to call this repository. Hello World. And you'll notice I put an underscore because the Python standard for separating different words is to use an underscore. So that's what we're going to use. The description we're just going to leave blank. We are always going to keep our repositories public, not private. That way I can see your code. Down in the section where it says add a README file, we are always going to check that. Okay, it's always good practice to have a README file, and we're going to add something to that later on. It's always good practice to add a git ignore. What git ignore does is files that aren't needed, that are used in compiling your program, it doesn't put them in the GitHub repository. So we're always going to use that, and you have to tell it what language you're using so that it knows what files to ignore. We're not going to choose a license, but you can choose a license if you want. And just a note for people that might have used GitHub before, you will notice that the standard now for the default branch is main. Okay, so default branch is always main. If you haven't used GitHub before, don't worry about it. You'll just automatically know that default branch is always main now. And we will now click Create Repository. It will go off and create that for us. Oops, something went wrong. There we go. So it should look something like this. Not quite sure why it did that. And we now have our repository. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add one of these things called actions. So actions are code that will run on your GitHub code that you submit, and GitHub can do certain things. And what we're going to do is check your style. Just like in English class, there's a certain way to write an essay. In coding class, there's a certain way to write your code, and it's going to check it for you to make sure that it's properly styled. So we're going to go to actions. We're going to go to set up a workflow yourself. And the default one that they give us, we're just going to remove it all. So we're just going to select Control A to select it and get rid of it. The code that we're going to put in here comes from the references section on the website. And if you scroll down, look for GitHub superlinter. Okay? And this is the code that we want to place in there. Unfortunately, because we're copying it from this website, it's actually going to put extra spaces in for us. So you can see that in a minute. Okay, see how it puts an extra space in between. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete those extra spaces so that it looks nicer. Okay, once you have that, it's probably better to copy this code from a previous repository than going back to the website, because then you don't have to delete all those extra spaces. When you're done, you can go over to Start Commit and commit your new file. Okay, so this is done. This file will run a GitHub action every single time you upload new code to this repository, and it will check your style to make sure it's correct. Now, to check to see if it's correct, you can go to GitHub Actions and you can check here. This orange means that it's running. You can see it's in progress right now. If it turns green, that means your style is correct. If it turns red, that means it's wrong. An easier way to find out is right at the root. So we're right at the back. Remember, this is our README file, is to put a badge here. So we're actually going to always put a badge so that it shows up right at the root as well. So to do that, we go over to the little edit symbol here, and we're just going to add in 2 spaces, and we're going to go back to references, and just below this, you will see this line of code here. So we're going to grab this, and we're going to paste it in, and there's just one thing that we need to change. You'll notice this placeholder needs to be updated. You have to put your GitHub login here and the repository name here. So here's your GitHub login and here's your repository name. It's hard to copy and paste it from here. It's actually easier to copy and paste it from the URL. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to copy it from here. And here, I'll paste it in. And there's 2 separate places that you need to put this in. There you go. And once again, you hit commit changes when you're done. And then if you go back to the root again, you can see this little badge here. So this is the GitHub Superlinter badge. There's no status because that GitHub action is running right now. When it's done, it will either turn green, which means your code is correct, or it'll turn red, which means you have some kind of style error that you would need to correct. And that's the process we're going to be using for creating a GitHub repository each time.